Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Laura Hanson with Connect My Brain. Well, we have been having such an incredible journey looking at child development. It's just something I'm incredibly passionate about. And I feel this urgency in helping our kids because the numbers are escalating all the time. The last couple of years have been very hard on our children. And with the changes we see from the CDC telling us it's okay if your kid takes forever to do something, we are going to be headed, unfortunately, to some harder times. And this is my way of putting information out there and trying to equip parents so that you can look at your child, realize what's going on, and begin to move on it quickly. The faster that you move on it, the better. But change is possible at any age, even for somebody my age. So I never want to take that hope away from it, but sometimes we've got to really get all the cards on the table, be ready to roll up our sleeves so we can move forward. Not only did we look at the CDC changes, but we've defined what is developmental delay. So developmental delay is typically either a child that has already been labeled, received a diagnosis, or you are suspecting that something isn't going right. And we base it on the developmental milestones. Last week we talked about language. Your child is already picking up sound in the womb. They should be cooing by no later than 7 weeks. Those are actually the vowel sounds. Then as time goes on, around 3 to 5 months, they're going to start laughing. They're going to start putting the consonant sounds with the vowel sounds. And then around 8 months, they're going to be doing double syllable. And then around a year, 2 to 3 words. So you should be expecting to hear those sounds. The earlier we look at this, we can begin to assess development and make sure that things are going in the right direction. So language, you've got to be able to hear. So when you're born, you come to this world, you can interpret low frequency sounds, but you can't pick up middle and high yet. And that's going to happen over the first 3 years of life. And the first 2, you're also maturing your gut. And the first 3, you're maturing your immune system. So everything that goes on in development overlaps. It's a giant network. And if we are living in chronic stress, that stress is going to impact how the development of the brain is going to go forward. There are all types of reflexes that are going on that are about bringing those neurocircuits together. And things can be interrupted. But when we know the timeline, we are able to be alerted so that we can do things that are going to make positive changes in the direction of that child's development. And that's what a developmental specialist is all about. And yes, that's what I am. I look at the development of a child. So this week, what I want to do is I want to kind of go over my background so that you can understand why I would put myself into a category of being a developmental specialist. So initially, I actually started off going to go to law school, and I'm really glad that I didn't go in that direction because that's not what I want to do. But I went to chiropractic school, and I really was very involved in the body. I had been a competitive bodybuilder. I had taught aerobics for 25 years. I was a personal trainer. The physical body meant everything. And when you live in a physical state of optimal health, performance is outstanding. And so that's what I was thinking about at the time. When I went to chiropractic school, we learned everything about the body. You know, people think that when you say the word chiropractor, you're just really talking about cracking people's bones. And That is not what we do. In fact, we have so many hours of training that it even exceeds what a medical doctor is getting in medical school. And so it's important to know the background of what somebody's education actually taught them. So we had kinesiology, we had biochemistry, we had organic chemistry, we had physiologies, and there's always like 1, 2, 3, and 4 of those. We did pharmacology. We learned about drugs. We had neurology. We had every course that you could possibly imagine on the human body, even histology, the study of tissues. We had to learn how to do blood draws. We had to learn how to do urine analysis. And yes, of course, we learned about the physical body, the spine, the structure. And the reason a chiropractor utilizes the spine in order to make changes to the nervous system is because they're joints. And in between each joint is a nerve. And that nerve goes to a variety of places. Now, up here at the top, we've also got not only the cervical spine, but you've also got the brain stem. And the brain stem is where all the cranial nerves are. And in many of these podcasts, I've talked to you about reflexes. And primitive reflexes are actually rooted in the brain stem. Now, we also look at the cranial structure. We talked about the cranial structure when we talked about the birth process. This is a structure that inside of the womb, it has an average size of 15 centimeters. And it's going to literally squish down on the brain to come to around 10 centimeters in order to go through the birth canal. And some children are born by C-section, which is going to disrupt what should be happening with the cranial vault. Some children may be born by forceps, which is also going to change the function of the cranial vault. And as a chiropractor, we actually are able to work on that cranial system so that we can restore the proper motion. I talked about this in that particular podcast on the birth process, that the cranial system is literally flexing and extending all through life. And what it's doing is pumping cerebral spinal fluid throughout the nervous system. So it's important that you realize what we actually do. Unfortunately, I think it's really too bad that even in my profession, a lot of people have gone in the direction of only focusing on pain. Now that could make for another podcast, and I won't necessarily go down that rabbit hole, but unfortunately that is the funnel that a lot of chiropractors go into. But I want you to know that that's not how we're taught. We're taught to look at the entire body. In fact, I work with a group of doctors that we literally talk about this concept, and we wanted to have a particular meeting that focused on how did you go from pain to brain. And when I sat down and I thought about it, I was never in the pain model. I've been doing this for 26 years, and that never even entered my mind. And in fact, in the first year, I began to notice how many children were coming into my practice, and I really wanted to know more about kids. So in our education, we don't get a lot of pediatrics, so I had started down a path to learn more about children. So if you ever look at a list of my credentials, you're going to see one that says a DICCP. This is a diplomate in clinical chiropractic pediatrics. This was a 3-year program where we focused on pregnancy and pediatrics. I had 10 modules a year, and then I had to sit for a board exam, and I have to continue my education in this particular arena in order to maintain this credential. So all doctors have to do continuing ed. So I have to do continuing ed as a doctor of chiropractic. I have to do continuing ed to maintain my diplomate status in clinical pediatrics, and I also have to maintain continuing education in the other credentials that I'm going to discuss with you. So we had to specialize in really understanding child development, how pregnancy influences child development, and then how to look at it clinically. Well, at the end of that journey, we had to also do case presentation. Now, this would have been the second experience for me that I had to do a presentation in front of a group of people. I had to do it one time in chiropractic school, and I'm doing it again now as a diplomate at the end of that program, which would be back in 1990, around 1998 or 99, somewhere in there. And my teacher at the time asked me to come and talk to her afterwards. And it was one of the most special days because she looked at me and she said, "You can teach." And I had never thought of myself as a teacher, even though the word doctor means teacher. I'd never thought of myself that way. So I was asked to teach neurology of all subjects in the pediatric diplomate program. Well, of course, I wanted to do an excellent job. And so I did everything I could to find out what other credentials could I earn that would then help other doctors who want to specialize in children. And I ran across a program. The initials are INPP, and it's the Institute for Neurophysiological Psychiatry. And they offer a program on primitive reflexes. And I have to tell you, that completely changed my course. I didn't want to do it just as we did it in school, where all you would do is trace neurological pathways. Like I had said this last week on the podcast, vestibular cochlear, which means that it goes from the vestibular system to the cochlear. And that to me was just really boring. So in this program, this is where I learned about all those reflex systems, starting off with withdrawal reflexes to primitive to postural. Well, that took around 18 months to complete, and this is what earned me the credentials of a neurodevelopmental therapist. So I would now have the training in primitive reflexes as a clinical pediatric specialist in chiropractic, as well as a doctor of chiropractic. But I have to tell you, that program was incredible. And understanding this reflex system, I really think I should do a whole series just on primitive reflexes, because this is the rudimentary place of all learning. And it isn't just about children. I had mentioned this before. My mother had a stroke back in 2004, and I remember working on her body, and I crossed over her hand, and literally she squeezed my hand so hard I thought my hand was going to break, but it was actually going back to a palmar reflex. So for the podcast audience, I'm literally placing my finger in my hand, and in that reflex, the baby would automatically close their hand. So this was very interesting, but in an adult, they would now refer to this as a pathological reflex. But in a baby, it's perfectly normal. And maybe a contrast story might be good here. I worked on a case where a little girl had a very bad seizure problem, and the dad had shared the birth with me, and it ended up being a C-section birth. And at last week's podcast, I also talked about problems typically that are organic or genetic in nature. They're going to show up immediately. They're not going to be a situation where your child is developing and then all of a sudden your child regresses. So in this particular delivery, the dad had a baby from a previous marriage, and so he was very aware of putting his finger in the baby's hand, and the baby should close its hand, and she didn't. The newborn is a little girl, and she didn't close, and that's a signpost. And I really wish in that moment that he had spoken up, but he didn't. And it was about 20 minutes later, and the baby started seizing, and it was just a horrific event for them to go through. So knowing these reflexes, they are signposts for us. And again, from our first episode in this series, we talked about how the CDC is now allowing children to wait and do everything, and we're going to have more children that are going to be impacted. But if we get this information out, we're going to alert more parents, and that's certainly my goal. So now let's move on. Where am I in my credentialing direction? So after I became an NDT, a neurodevelopmental therapist, I was now working actually in the chiropractic education arena. And I had an opportunity to go after my master's. And so I did. I got my master's in sports health science with a concentration in nutrition, because that's what they had, that's what was available. And so I was able to do my papers and things like that on nutrition, and that's what I was looking for, is looking at the different components of nutrition and how this affected child development. The paper that I did was on children born to parents that were vegetarians and the incidence of low B or high B deficiencies in that pediatric population, because your B vitamins are so crucial for your nervous system. So that was my 4th credential. Then I was very involved in neurofeedback already at this time, mainly because of the primitive reflexes, specifically the Moro reflex, which I have spoken about in many of the podcasts. But the Moro reflex is, to me, the enchilada of all reflexes. And it comes on board 9 weeks in pregnancy, and it's meant to integrate between the 2nd and 4th month after the baby is born. This reflex is going to ignite arousal, CO2O2 reflex, and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is related to the words fight or flight, which I think most people are aware of. However, when you're born, the sympathetic nervous system acts completely different, and it literally quiets everything down. So this can be a connection for children if it does not come back up as it is expected to do or in those early months, because the baby is going to lean on this Moro reflex in order to get attention from people so that they are attended to. And we talked about the arousal factor. The baby will become aroused when it's hungry. The baby will become aroused when it wakes up. A baby will become aroused when it's uncomfortable. And again, that is to get us to pay attention to them. And eventually arousal is going to switch. And we're going to now start teaching our toddlers how to attend to themselves. And then eventually the school-age child will learn how to attend or pay attention to the teacher. And so I've tied this one back many times to so many children that are labeled either ADD or ADHD or some subcategory of attention deficit. And then CO2O2 reflex has to do with oxygen and how important it is that we are all getting enough oxygen. And so we've talked about how this has impacted our children, especially over the last 2 years being masked, and that they're not getting enough oxygen. And your brain will become aroused within 20 seconds when you don't get enough oxygen. And now we're in a fight or flight, which leads to a cascade of inflammatory chemicals and literally can lock children in a heightened stress response that, if nobody knows how to assess for primitive reflexes, they literally are going to get into this spiral, And this spiral can then start to take over the terrain of the brain, and where they should be going towards things and learning and really blooming their brain, they're not. They're in a chronic state of stress. Their brains are getting bathed in stress chemicals. Their bodies are getting out of balance. And we can change this. We can quantify it, as well as we can do integrative therapies that are going to allow that pattern to be broken and to allow that child to move forward. But early on, trying to show a parent what a Moro reflex looks like. So if I say the word startle, I think most people will understand that somebody may jump. So for my podcast audience, I just did a little startle movement where my arms went up and my face jerked a little bit like I'm startled by something. Well, this is not always easy to see, and especially if you don't know what you're looking for, you may go, I really don't know what you're looking for. And I was so fortunate to get one piece of equipment brought to me that would actually allow me to measure the stress response. And so this was early on for me back in 2005. 2008. I could quantify the Moro reflex. So I would do an assessment on the child. I would have my mechanical pieces. Then I would do the stress response evaluation, which literally we're measuring brain responses, we're measuring heart rate responses, respiration, skin conduction or moisture. So when we're stressed, we typically can get clammy hands. The longer this goes on, we may get really cold hands, cold feet, because that chronic pattern of stress is literally changing blood flow to the most distal end. We're going to check temperature. We're going to check respiration and muscle tone. And we can quantify if someone's in a chronic stress pattern. Now, this is such an important part of the program because not only is it about the primitive reflexes, but I'm able to then determine, are you in a fight or flight pattern? And if your brain is in that pattern, you are literally getting two messages, fight or run. And if we don't break that, it's very difficult to get the brain to go forward. So let me put this into some application where you might see it even in your own child or maybe even yourself. So the first 7 years of life is the development of the subconscious brain. So the first 7 years, your little one is basically following you like a little duckling. And I can certainly see it in my kids where they've got personality traits or behavior traits that they absolutely learned from me. And I've seen it also in practice. I've worked on thousands of kids. I've worked with their families, and you can see the patterns that are there. The subconscious mind is 95% of your brain function. The conscious brain is only 5%. Now, there's going to be a huge shift in brain maturation between 7.5 and 8.5. So again, this is where I highlight, if your child is under 7.5 and you feel in your gut that something is going on, please do not wait. If your program is going great, stick to it. But if you're not sure, reach out. After 8.5, it's not that it's impossible. It's never impossible. I'm 61 and I can continue to change. But it does. It becomes a little bit harder. And so we have to be ready to roll up our sleeves and do the work. But it can be done. But if the parent is in a stress pattern, well, it's going to be difficult for them to navigate the path. They're going to be more resistant to the things that need to be changed in order to get the child to go in that direction. And it's not because a parent doesn't want to. It's never because of that. And your child's behavior is not because they just have bad behavior. I think that's the part I really cannot stand about the way our world looks at children with developmental delay. Is it's always typically a behavioral issue, and it really isn't. It's going on. Sorry, that was probably pretty loud, and I apologize. It's going on because something in their neurology is not working right. And if we can figure it out and you work on the entire person, mechanically, chemically, and their brain, you can make changes. I see it every single day. Well, working with this particular piece of equipment, doing stress response evaluations, it also allowed me to do biofeedback and neurofeedback. What's the difference? Well, remember what we were looking at in that stress response test. We were looking at heart rate. We were looking at skin conduction, moisture, temperature, respiration, muscle tone. Those are all the systems that respond when somebody has a stress response or a fight or flight. So if they are dysregulated, meaning that they're not functioning the way that they're supposed to, you can actually do biofeedback training and restore that practice for yourself. In order to change the brain, regardless if we're talking about the biocenters or the vital centers or literally the brain, you have to do it in real time. There has to be a feedback mechanism to the brain that says, you've got this. When we isolate therapies and then we send somebody off, this is what I want you to practice this week, or this is what I want you to be mindful this week. The person is not receiving a feedback message to know that they're actually doing it correctly. Coupling neurofeedback, biofeedback therapy with any other therapy really complements one another, because now the person is learning in real time what it feels like to actually breathe from their diaphragm, how to regulate their temperature, how to experience an opened mind. And I'll get a little bit deeper into those elements as I describe what these practices are. So if I'm going to practice biofeedback, let's say I'm going to start with heart rate variability, gold standard for managing stress. I'm going to wear a respiration monitor around my belly, and I'm going to put a heart rate monitor on my finger. And we start with a visual cue. There's many ways of doing it, but we start with a visual cue. We also put some nice alpha brainwave music in the background. And literally the person is going to practice the breath that's going to allow them to create the image that they see in front of them. So the image that they see, in my opinion, looks like a slide. It literally has this upward motion, a little pause at the top, and then it has a downward portion. The downward portion is twice as long as the upward. There's a yellow ball. We're going to say, be the yellow ball. Breathe in, hold it at the top, and now let it go as slow as you possibly can. Now, when you breathe in or going up that slide, that is your sympathetic nervous system, the same one we call fight or flight. We're taking a pause at the top, and then we're going to transition into the exhale, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, feed, breathe, digest. So those are the two components of the autonomic nervous system that have to be in balance. So your fight or flight is actually responsible for every breath you take. So it's very easy, if we're in a chronic stress pattern and we're no longer breathing from our diaphragm, that we only get into the upper apices of the lungs, and we are changing how much oxygen is readily available, creating now a chemical component to the mechanical component that you are not getting oxygen and you're back into another stress pattern. It can go on, and it comes from every different angle. But you can practice and get the feedback and literally see your breath going in this pattern. And typically what we see in the beginning is the heart rate's going to go up when you breathe in, the heart rate's going to go down when you exhale. But when most people with a chronic stress pattern start, they can only breathe in this kind of a pattern for about a minute and a half. And then all of a sudden, that heart rate is just not doing anything. I call it flatlining. Now, it's not really flatlining, but literally, the heart rate is no longer in rhythm with the breath. And rhythm is everything about this human physiology. Your heart has a rhythm, your breath has a rhythm, your digestion has a rhythm, your sleep-wake cycle is a rhythm, your elimination is a rhythm. Once you start to restore the breathing pattern and you're able to actually get into a full diaphragmatic breath, you're going to do something so powerful inside of your body. And it's why neurofeedback and biofeedback is known to work. You literally brush up against what's called your vagus nerve, which goes everywhere in your body, up to your brain, down in your body, and it literally is going to reset the rhythm of the body. This is how we know it works. So typically we're going to start with around about 3 to 10 minutes of biofeedback work. And then you're going to go over to the neurofeedback station and you're going to do neurofeedback. And that's specifically for the brain. Now, we are going to do a brain map on you. That is going to show us the areas where the brain is out of range. Now, this can be too much and it can be too little. And it's incredible the information that you get back. But this practice itself is what led me to become board certified in neurofeedback. And so I have become very involved, and I have to tell you, this is a huge part of our practice. In fact, the third floor is considered the brain floor. This is where we do biofeedback and neurofeedback training. The cool part about neurofeedback is that it will continue to work even after you're done with your program. And people come back all the time and say, it's amazing. I was away for a week and I could still feel like I was able to be in that present moment. So how does neurofeedback work? Well, all kinds of systems are different, but the background to it is the same. You're going to figure out where the brain is out of range. You're going to couple that with the person's goals. It should not be, I'm going to work on the periphery of you. No, we are always in a partnership. And then based on your map, based on your goals, a program is going to be created. Now, again, remember what I told you about the subconscious. The subconscious brain is 95% of your brain function. We want you to sit there and enjoy either Netflix, YouTube, whatever it is that you want to watch. We're going to put a filter over the screen. This is going to be the visual part. There's going to be a sound correlated to your program. When your brain is in the expected range of the program that is created, the reward is going to be generated through the subconscious finding the pattern. And so for our system, when you're in that correct range, you're going to hear the birds chirp and the picture is going to become bright. You don't even have to pay attention to it, although it's amazing to me how well the children pick up the pattern. I'll say, how did you do today? I did really well. I go, how do you know? And they go, because the screen was always bright. They pick it up for themselves. It's fabulous. Now, you adults, you're a little tricky because you've been around on planet Earth for a long time and you want to muscle it. And you want to go, so what do I have to do to make it happen? You got to allow it to happen. You got to let your brain begin to, first of all, become aware that you're even in this practice and that these filters are there. And then you got to let go. And then your brain becomes more flexible. And then we can really hone in and really specialize your particular program. And then you're on your way, you get it. Sometimes I think it just takes the adults a little bit more time. So that was my journey with becoming board certified in neurofeedback, which I think is an amazing therapy. The cool part too about bio and neurofeedback, you don't have to have a problem to do this. It's also for entrepreneurs and peak performers. In fact, I really think this is where the profession is going, because we have people that really want to excel. And especially at this time in our lives when so many people have had to go through so much, and maybe lose a job, lose a career, lose their business. You have that entrepreneurial spirit, and we need to get you going again. We have in our e-school not only a Connect Journal for adults, but a Connect Journal for entrepreneurs. And if you're an entrepreneur, check that out. So my next one is becoming a certified autism specialist. And I've done this through a program where I had to go through some training, take a test, and then again, just like with neurofeedback, just like with my diplomate, just like with my neurodevelopmental therapy level, continue to do continuing education. And now I'm actually working on my my 7th credential. I am studying for a test to become a diplomate in reading QEEG. What does that mean? So that's the raw data when you do a brain map and you're actually looking at the waves, you're looking at the patterns, you're looking at the different regions and what you're supposed to see. And to be able to look at that and to make some determinations based on just looking at raw data. I love neurofeedback. I think it's an incredible therapy, and it really has. It's motivated me to keep going, keep learning. I am a life learner, but I've done all of these specialized areas because I'm not just a chiropractor. I love being a chiropractor. I think a chiropractic adjustment is the most incredible thing in the whole wide world. Even because of all the neurology that I've gone into, even my thoughts about the adjustment have changed over time. I used to think when I first got into chiropractic school, you just couldn't get adjusted enough. And now I don't think that way. The over-aroused system does much better if they get an adjustment once a week or once every 2 weeks, where the under-aroused system does better with a little bit more frequency. But that's what's happened, becoming a life learner. I'm able to learn new perspectives. I'm able to look at all current research and put pieces together and then apply them to my patients. Here at Connect My Brain, we take a very personalized approach where we do a lot of similar programs, but every one of them are tweaked, specific for that individual. We look at the mechanical by doing a neurological developmental assessment. We look at the chemistry by doing functional labs, looking at the real physiology of the body, and everything is always matched to the concerns of the parents, the concerns of the individual, and where that person has already been in their journey. We look at the brain. We do brain mapping, we do stress response evaluation, and we put all of this together so that we are looking at the whole person. Connect My Brain is available for services in office as well as remote. Every week, I've invited you to give us a call. If you have something you just want to have a conversation about, we are happy to give you a complimentary consultation. You can call the office and set that up. Our number is 678-501-5172. You can go on the website. We have a form that you can fill out. If you want to touch base with me, tell me what's going on. Also, tell me when you're available so that we can connect as quickly as possible. We have an e-school that has some resources on it. We do developmental assessments over Zoom as well as in the office. Most of the time, I will encourage parents to please, we can start there, but I'd love for you to plan a time to come and spend about a week with me so that we really can work everything up. And then there's many things that you can do from home. We have several people here this summer. So there's so many parts to connect my brain. We've also got a survey on our website. We want to know, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to know about this marvelous brain and what it can do for you by just understanding it a little bit better? We've also got some free downloads. And be sure to download and share with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We love being part of your community. Now, next week is going to be the last part of this series. And we're actually going to be interviewing a mom that has come through the program. And you can hear her experience, what her child was going through, what the program did, and what she learned as being part of Connect My Brain. We hope that you will take part in that podcast with us. So no matter where you are, no matter what day of the week you are listening to this podcast, I hope the rest of your week is enjoyable, and we will see you next time.